When you have to shoot, don't talk.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another Trap House podcast. We got a great show today. It's a little different than what we normally or typically do. We have talked to biologists and some other folks like that in the past. On this episode, we got two doctors joining us. They're out of Kansas State, and they're really looking into parasites, creepy crawly stuff, basically, in fur bearers, mainly around coyotes. There's a worm in there that they're really looking into, and it's very interesting. So sit tight. We're gonna get to that. You might learn something on this one, and you'll definitely want to start washing your hands a lot more, to say the least. But before we talk to them, I do want to say thanks to all the sponsors. We have WeeBeKnives.com. There's a whole list, if you get on their website, of different knives available there to you for either skinning in the field or you need a fleshing knife in your fur shed. There's several options there, so check out WeeBeKnives.com. We also have J3 Outdoors. They're J3O.com. That's Jeff Haggerty there. He maker of the Hags Bracket. He's even got a coffee line out now, Trapline Coffee, I believe. I haven't had it yet. I'm not much of a coffee drinker myself, but you might want to check it out. J3O.com. Then Top Lot Stretcher Company. They're great sponsors. Good people, had them on the show. And they have an adjustable stretcher that we're really, really fond of, that we like. So you can check out their website. It's toplotstretcherco.com. And last but not least, it's Hoosier Trapper Supply. Season's almost here, so head on over. Our catalog's recently been mailed out. We got everything you need, from trapping supplies, trapping packages, lure bait, urine, and including deer scent. So we're right in that neighborhood that time of year. So it's very exciting. It's a good time. So get stocked up at HoosierTrapperSupply.com. And all right, let's go talk about this nasty, creepy, crawly stuff in coyotes. Thanks. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We got another great podcast interview here today. And, we talk about trapping all the time on this show, but sometimes it's good to know some background about what you're trapping and what they get into, especially coyotes. They can get into some nasty stuff as far as other insect, disease, parasites, all that good stuff. So we have two professionals here to help us guide us through what you guys have at the Coyote Study that you're doing there in Kansas. And does this go across the entire country, or is it just you guys local there working?
Right now we're looking at coyotes in Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana as kind of our target population. And I know there's other groups that are interested in looking at coyotes elsewhere in the U.S. And so, if you hear something about a parasite group at a university looking for coyotes, help them out too if it's not us, because we're trying to join forces to just learn more about, again, what you said, the parasites that these coyotes have, what the true risk is to the trappers and general population, and to other dogs, cats, animals around.
Okay, real quick, Brian, since you started in there, can you give a brief background of what your area of expertise is, and what's your title?
Yeah,
both of you, actually.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm Brian Herrin. I am a veterinarian, and I am a researcher here at Kansas State University. I study parasites, so if we're thinking ticks and fleas and worms and all kinds of creepy crawlies. And I've been at K-State for about 5 years now, and really now expanding my research projects outside of Kansas, looking kind of regionally at some of these parasites of concern for both our domestic animals like dogs and cats, and humans as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I'm Kamilyah Miller, also a veterinarian, but I am a grad student, so I'm getting my PhD studying parasites. So Dr. Herrin's already board certified, and I'm in the process of going through my board or my program to be able to be board certified. So again, I'm also interested in parasites and studying, again, those creepy crawlies that affect animals. So I should be done in about 2.5 years.
Okay. So, and this all came, I mean, we're talking to you because you are doing a specific study with coyotes here in Indiana, in addition to the other states.
Yeah, this all started because there were 2 case reports of this disease, and we'll talk about that. It's a tapeworm, and lots of people jokingly say, "Oh, I'll take a tapeworm to help me lose weight." And the dogs and coyotes, they get it intestinally, right? And so that just kind of is the normal life cycle. The coyotes would pick that parasite up from catching rodents that are infected, and they have a stage that's in their abdomen around their liver. It kind of takes up space in their liver. And the really, really problematic part of this specific tapeworm is that humans and dogs can get the liver stage too. And so it's not that kind of funny, oh, I'm losing weight. It's like, oh, I'm having my organs kind of damaged from the inside, and I don't even know it. And so it is a significant, risk, at least of causing disease. What we're trying to do is study, how risky is it? What's the likelihood that people are going to get it? Because these 2 dogs in Missouri got the parasite, and that was outside of what we expected the normal range to be. And we looked around and said, okay, no one's studied this parasite for about 30 years. So maybe it's time for us to check in. Coyotes have moved around, coyote populations have expanded dramatically. Maybe they've moved these parasites into new areas and we need to take a look at it. And so that's really what prompted us. And Indiana is an area that was positive 30 years ago. So this isn't a new crazy risk that we're trying to scare people about. It's been around. We're trying to document the spread of that. And then also to kind of see if these coyotes moving a little bit more peri-domestically is increasing the risk to pet dogs, right? Just kind of walking, out for your nightly walk type of situation.
So is this limited to canines only then?
This parasite can infect cats occasionally, bobcats and domestic cats, but really foxes and coyotes are the major species that we see infected with kind of the adult tapeworms and the intestines we think of. Uh, for the kind of intermediate stage, or what keeps that life cycle moving around, is the rodents that have the stages in their livers, and that's also can be seen in dogs and humans. So kind of a wide variety of animals that keep this kind of tapeworm going in the wild, really.
And you said you had positive cases of it here in Indiana. You said 30 years ago.
Yeah, there's some really great research in the 90s of parasitologist at Purdue that was studying Echinococcus in coyotes, and they knew there was positive cases, and so it's been there. It's kind of the trail into Missouri was kind of unexpected, and then we've now found some in Kansas, and that was really unexpected as well, because studies around that time also showed there weren't any coyotes that were positive in those regions, and so we think it is spreading and moving it around a little bit.
Okay. So is it more prevalent here than there? I mean, the starting point was here, maybe?
That is what we're trying to find out.
Okay.
And so that's where we're kind of leaning in on the trapping associations and hunters to help us in looking at what the percent of coyotes that are infected. I would say right now, low carcass numbers, but we're what, 1 of 2 from Kansas, and how many from Missouri have been positive, Dr. Miller?
2 of 8.
2 of 8. So
Mhm.
we're sitting at about a third of the coyotes that we found so far have been positive, and that was just random sampling. And so um, the kind of scary part is it could be a high number of coyotes that are actually infected with this.
So I mean, you guys are obviously wanting trappers to provide carcasses this upcoming fall and winter for testing purposes
Mhm.
to get maybe a more accurate percentage of how many are infected.
Yes. And, one of the easiest ways for us to start making those connections is we have a website and a Facebook that we can provide you all with the info on. Um, just ways for us to communicate with those hunters and trappers and say, hey, we're making the loop around Indiana. If you happen to be trapping this weekend, we're going to be there on Saturday, making this loop. We can stop by and pick up carcasses. And we have some areas to centralize those carcasses um, with the fur bear biologist in Indiana as well, if you kind of live in the central area around Bloomington. Um, so we have lots of options. What helps is if we have a way to communicate with the trappers, and so we'll kind of shout out our Facebook here at the end so that the trappers could reach out kind of to us and get more information.
Yeah. And I'll put that in the description below. So whoever's listening, the links will be below as well.
Thank you.
So it's kind of interesting. We didn't really have coyotes in Indiana until the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s is when they kind of started showing up. And then this was, you had Purdue's researcher found some of this Echinococcus.
Echinococcus, yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'm
Some of
not
this
even
is like, way over us. But so was it in the foxes then prior to that, or do you know?
So foxes are actually a better definitive host. So they're more likely to keep that life cycle going. And I
Okay.
think the rise in coyote population kind of intermingled those populations. We are specifically selecting coyotes because I felt more confident in our ability to get the number of animals we needed to kind of look into this for coyotes in comparison to foxes. And so foxes are another great host. It's just for research purposes, it made more sense for us to go after coyotes in the trapping seasons.
I mean, just from my lay perspective, clearly there's going to be more coyotes available than foxes. When the coyotes showed up, our fox numbers went down, and I know that that's not a scientific statement, but that it is as to why, but that is true. So,
Yep.
But yeah, so yeah, clearly you're going to be able to get a lot more coyote carcasses. So, unfortunately, coyote prices are not very good, so there will be less activity out there after them.
Yeah.
But I still think that you guys will probably do well with your collection of specimens.
And the thing about our study is we're not after any of the fur. So if there's a potential to skin it and keep the carcass, we'll take that. If you get one that the fur looks terrible and you aren't going to do anything with it anyway, we'll take that one. Where, the actual fur isn't of
you don't need it. Yeah.
interest to us. Yeah. Our main pieces are just making sure, again, everyone's following state regulations for collecting coyotes. And so we're definitely interested in legal trapping, or if there are kind of hunting times as well. We're here talking about trapping, but as long as they're legally collected, that's kind of our main thing. To make sure it's done within the what Indiana has said everyone can do, and
right.
Outside of that, we're good.
Okay. So has this shown up in any humans?
Dr. Miller, you want to talk about that case?
Yeah, there's a classic case from 1977 of a woman in Minnesota, but there was a more recent case in 2012 of, I believe it was a woman in Virginia. But most of these cases come from humans who have had contact with historically with foxes when they were younger.
Mhm.
So because humans aren't a natural intermediate or definitive host, like, so we're not meant to carry this parasite, it grows a lot slower than it would the intermediate stages than it would in a rodent species, right? So if a rodent were to contract an egg, it would take like 2 to 4 months for them to develop in the liver. But for us, it takes 10 to 15 years before it's noticed. So most of these cases, I think the 1977 case, she was fox hunting when she was a child, and the same thing with the 2012 case. So there have been a couple cases in the United States, but again, not enough where we're ringing alarm bells.
Mhm. I guess that would lead to it may not necessarily be detected though if it was that long a time frame.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so scary for humans, is because I can eat an egg unknowingly today, right? It's immediately infective to me. And then the immediate stages develop in my liver, but I don't really know it until I develop some abdominal pain, or I go and get blood work done and I've got some elevated liver values or something like that. And then you go and you're like, oh, you go to the doctors and I've got a mass in my liver, or I've got a mass in my lung. And they look at it and they're like, oh, you've got Echinococcus. You have to backtrack so many years because you just don't know.
Right.
Is why we want our trappers to be safe. Again, not something where we're trying to ring alarm bells, but when you're going for those scent glands, or if you're handling feces, or you come in contact with feces, immediately wash your hands, wear gloves if you can. Obviously, you don't need to go in a full hazmat suit or anything like that, but just wanting to make sure that you practice safe carcass handling is going to be like the number one thing in making sure that you protect yourself.
Right. So is it strictly through feces, or can you get it
Through blood?
Not blood. It's going to be strictly through feces. So since the adults live in the intestines, they're going to release eggs, and those eggs will end up in the feces. And then that's when the rodents come along, right? They come in contact with the infected feces, eat those eggs, they develop in the liver, the coyote or a red fox eats that rodent species, and then the cycle continues. So yeah, feces is going to be the main way. Fecal oral is the main
Right.
way for transmission.
that back years ago no one wore gloves?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and
and
I get it. When I was in vet school, and I was in and I worked in large animal, I love large animal medicine, and I never wore gloves. This is kind of gross. Like, I remember working with animals and then going to eat my lunch, and I looked at my hands and I was like, I did not wash my hands. I was like, okay, that's fine. I got up, washed my hands. I was like, we go on about our day. So I understand. Like, even in my own life, I don't. There's moments where I'm like, dang, I should probably be wearing gloves. Like, okay, let me go wash my hands, put gloves on. It's not second nature, right? So
yeah.
I understand, but it's just, again, once you do better when you know better. So
Sure,
we
exactly.
know
Yeah.
that there's stuff out there. So even if you don't want to wear gloves, right? Even like rinsing your hands or just washing them and just going on, just trying to make sure you're safe.
Yeah. It's people are much more conscious of it today than they were, and I suppose I'm past that 12 to 15 year window, but I hope
Yeah.
but there, we still have a lot of people that just don't take it, even just basic sanitation for instance at a fur sale, very not very conscious of it, or they don't take it very seriously, so yeah, I mean, it's just good common sense to wear gloves and wash your hands and all, it just a basic, certainly washing your hands in basic life anyways, but
Yeah.
even if you're not handling carcass, but yeah, the gloves are very important. So.
What do we need to do to check Charlie? Because I bet he's got this.
that's the really scary thing, right? Is because it takes so long, then
Mhm.
it usually gets kind of, I don't want to say accidentally found, but it gets large enough that it starts to cause some pain, and they think it's cancer, liver cancer, and they then go in and check it out, and it's not cancer. And so that that slow growing, it just, you know, there's nothing, kind of the one additional piece is there's not really much you can do. You can't just take a pill and it dies off or anything
Right.
like that. And so once it's there, it gets kind of tricky to get rid of it. So again, a reason, if it's, you know, picking up something off of a doorknob and you get a cough and you can treat it, and you'll be out for a week and you're good or something.
Right.
That's
Right.
one thing. But if you get something that is not really readily treatable, and you get stuck with something for life, it's another kind of risk elevation where
Sure.
uh, may want to take increased precautions.
So I know people that probably should have it by the way, but what they do.
It's actually
And still
surprising.
do.
I think it does speak to kind of the relative low risk to humans in the US right now. When the parasite gets set up in a really local area, it's a worldwide parasite. And so when it does get set up heavily in a uh, kind of a local area, and it gets into the domestic dogs, we start to see cases in humans spike as well. And so I think we're at an overall relatively low risk still, but I think I always say low risk isn't no risk, right?
Right.
So, and we don't know. I'm just kind of guessing right now, and that's this project is to help us inform our guesses, and we'll probably spill this over and start testing some of those pet animals, some of the hunting dogs that may be out and exposed to rodents, or shelter dogs that are you know previously unknown history. They're out on the streets eating whatever. Start testing some of those to see what the risk is, kind of in the closer confinement to humans compared
Mhm.
to coyotes. But we're kind of slogging through all the options to see what the true risk to humans is. And again, probably still pretty low, but uh, it's definitely different than it used to be, and that's at least worth noting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So just to switch gears a little bit, what's the parasite that is of concern that raccoons have?
Mhm.
That's Balis ascaris. So Balis ascaris is a um, intestinal worm of raccoons, and humans get it, again, ingesting infectious eggs. So raccoons use those latrines,
Right.
and I think most people think, there's no way I'm not over there eating raccoon feces or anything weird like that, but that soil stays contaminated for a really long time. These eggs are very hardy. And so when we think about ways in which people get infected with parasites, one of the top ways is actually vegetation that has been contaminated with fecal, material or soil. So it can be accidental in some of those. And Balis ascaris is up there in the top 5 scary for me as well, because it moves around in the brain a little bit. And
Mhm.
so again, that safe handling, I would say the vast majority of raccoons do have Balis ascaris, especially young ones. And so they shed high numbers of eggs. So that's another, great one to think about, safe handling and storage, just because that's another kind of top 5 scary parasite for me.
Yeah. Did I read in here correctly that raccoons can carry the parasite that we're talking about within the coyotes?
For
Hmm.
Echinococcus, not likely.
Okay.
So things spill over weirdly sometimes, but our main ones for the Echinococcus, that tapeworm, is the foxes and coyotes. Uh, Raccoons, they carry their own crazy host of things that humans can get. Balis ascaris, that one you brought up, being kind of the highest one on the list.
Okay.
Yeah, so something simple as going to pick something out of your garden, you could easily not even know it, not even be around coyotes
Yeah,
or coons or something.
that is a really tough part of human parasites. Is a lot of them can are we say fecal oral, so it's the infectious stage is shed in the feces of an animal, and then humans get it orally, and everyone thinks, hey man, you say that, but I'm not out there eating raccoon poop, so
Yeah.
I don't know what you're up to, but whatever. But really, the eggs are so environmentally stable that if there happens to be plants planted there, vegetables planted there, then that becomes a really common infection route for humans, which is why they always, for lots of reasons, uh, you hear public health people say wash your vegetables, and a lot of it is the salmonellas and things that kind of are in runoff and end up in your lettuce. But parasites are another thing that happen, kind of transmit on vegetation. So yeah, it's kind of outside of the scope of trapping, but washing your vegetables, there's lots of good reasons to do that, and parasites are one of them.
Yeah.
So you talk about how hardy these eggs are. Can you give us like an example? Like how long could that last on the ground? Months? Like
I would
week?
I would I would probably say years for some of
Years?
these. Uh-huh. Um, they take some time to develop, so they'll take a couple of weeks to develop up to be infectious to humans, but then they stay inside their shell, and that shell is pretty protective. So unless they dry out, direct sunlight, things like that, they can stay out in the environment, and they're pretty resistant to um, lots of environmental conditions. And depending on which parasite egg it is, um, I would say months to years is kind of the range I would throw out there. But it's definitely not short. It's not as short as I think most people would think of.
Okay.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What else you got, Charlie?
So, um, so you're going to collect carcasses, and then, are you just going to do it this season alone, or are you going to? You figure you'll get enough of a good sample this year, I assume. Is that the
Uh,
plan?
that's always the plan.
Yeah.
That's the ideal plan, but is that the realistic plan? Sometimes not really.
Right.
So our study goal is 20 to 50 carcasses. And not just from one area in the state. We'd really like to get a feel for statewide what the prevalence is in coyotes. So, we'll be looking for coyotes from northwest, southeast, and central Indiana. And I think, multi-year study. So if we don't get enough coyotes this year, it does continue on into next year and the 2020 or the 2023-2024 trapping season.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So
And the number, so we said 20 to 50, and we've chatted with lots of people that say, oh come on, I get way more than that a
Yeah.
season. And we agree, and we're happy. Our goal is then to connect with you somehow. And again, sounds like you all are gonna put our links on the bio here. So if you're listening
right.
and you think, oh my gosh, I get way more than that, hit us up. Let us know how we can help you get the carcasses to us. And we've got kind of a network. We're going to try to get out there, and we know everyone doesn't have a million freezers to store carcasses or anything like that. We may have to pick and choose when we make trips up there when it's nice and cold, and you can keep a couple of carcasses outside for us or something like that. um, Help us kind of get to you. So if you think, oh, I trap a bunch and I don't really have much use for these carcasses after I'm done skinning them or whatever it is, reach out to us, our website or our Facebook, and we'd love to try to figure out how we can, make that transition, getting the carcasses from you as easy as possible for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I got a question on that note. For people that turn in carcasses, Would it be okay if it didn't have the head, the skull being removed?
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
that's fine. We're kind of open. Yeah, we're kind of open to receiving the carcasses that we get. One of the kind of major uh, out or reasons we would not include a carcass is just this if it's degraded for a really long time, right? And
Right.
especially it's still a little bit warm right now, and so we don't want a carcass from a week ago that's been sitting out in the heat and looks terrible, right? We need it semi-ish fresh, or it to be cooled enough that things aren't kind of degrading,
Right.
because we need to get to the parasite inside there. So as it gets colder, that time window elongates where you can keep them outside for a little while if it's snow on the ground, things like that. So it make it easier for trappers to hold on to a few more for us. Um, and I think that's really the only kind of, we don't want 2 months ago's carcass that you toss back there and it's just skin and bones now type of thing.
Right. Right.
Um, what if it's well, fresh carcass, but say a deer hunter or somebody, it's gut shot. Since we're talking about intestinal and all that, if it happened to be shot in that area, is it still worth it to you?
That's okay for us. We want to just encourage them to practice safe handling again. And one of the questions we got was, I don't know if you just want the intestines. Can I take those? We're really not encouraging people to do that. And the carcasses is a little bit more. There's more space, and we just didn't feel comfortable asking other people to get in there and handle the intestines, and we're going to do it as safely as possible. And so, if it is gut shot, again, I would say be safe in your handling, and if you can get it into a trash bag and kind of reduce the number of times you actually need to touch the carcass, that's great. It's okay with us. We'll take the necessary precautions. We just also want to encourage the trappers to take those precautions too.
Okay. So we actually have a lot more listeners outside of Indiana than we do here in Indiana. So you're doing this in Missouri, Illinois,
And Kansas.
Kansas, and okay, in Indiana. So I mean, this has a relevancy for really everyone that has coyotes in their neighborhood or in their state.
Mhm.
Really, in the overall big picture, I mean, even though this would be the study area, I assume that you probably may go to other states after this or take a look at this.
Yeah, it's worth kind of checking around for sure. The more northern states, so I said Indiana's, it's already been reported, and kind of even north from that, been reported previously as well. There's a group out of the University of Georgia. There's a whole kind of group called the Southeast Cooperative for Wildlife Disease Surveillance. And that's their main job, is to look for these big diseases that are affecting wildlife populations, thinking about like chronic wasting disease in deer, West Nile in bald eagle populations. They're looking at avian flu and lots of wild bird populations right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a group of them that are also surveilling for Echinococcus in coyotes along kind of the eastern states. So in my brain, it's kind of Pennsylvania straight down currently for theirs. So again, um, if you're not in our state regions, but you hear about someone who's looking for carcasses, there's other groups doing work right now, and they would probably love your help too. So any time we can help out, again, Georgia, I think University of Virginia is doing a little surveillance too. So anytime we can help them out, it definitely helps out the whole group of figuring out what's going on here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that you check on the carcasses, or you're like, doing another study while you're doing this one, like it's kind of a double duty, since you have them there in your possession?
Yeah. So because we have the whole carcass, we're collecting a representative sample from all the tissues that that we get. We're looking at all the parasites we can find. So kind of documenting any parasites, not just the, Echinococcus tapeworm. So looking for any, and then we're actually working with lots of the State Department of Natural Resources or conservation or whatever it is to say, hey, we're looking for this parasite and we're going to collect tissues. So if you want to circle around and get a piece of liver or a piece of muscle to test, whatever it is you want down the line, we have those samples frozen and we're openly offering them to researchers who would like to use them for specific things. And so
Okay.
we have ideas moving forward. Sometimes those ideas take money, right? And so we're waiting around to get some of the funds to test them, but we also are openly letting researchers in each state kind of know that we'd love to share samples because, like you said, we're in there collecting these carcasses, and it's a really unique sample to get, and it takes a lot of work for us, and so we want to make sure that it pays off for the greater kind of science community.
Right. So when this study, you said it's 2 more years after this, is that correct? So this might be the cart in front ahead of the horse, but so when you kind of wrap this up, I'm assuming you'll write a extensive report on your findings. And so where does it go from there?
Well, we want to get information back locally as well. So I mean, we write the paper, that goes out into a journal that none of the trappers will read or anything like that. So we're hoping, because we're already making these networks with the hunters and trappers in each state, that we'll be able to communicate back to them through, again, their Department of Natural Resources or through their state trapping organizations, because we want to thank them and let them know kind of what we found. The other thing is we want to use this to increase surveillance in our pet population, maybe do some rodent surveillance, and then, like you mentioned, add on more states. And so we're going to take this data that we're getting and really use it to say, here's the risk, and we think it's worth looking at the rodents in that area. Are we seeing an expansion of one rodent population versus another, and it's more likely to have this parasite? Or, what habitats might be most conducive for this parasite to complete its life cycle? So we can let people know, hey, that log pile out back, be careful. It's a great breeding ground for this rodent, whatever it is that may help us find out more about the life cycle as it's going on here in the US.
So is this typical area of study for you in small mammals then? I guess you said you did large animal veterinarian. But as far as the disease issues outside of this study, is that generally where you guys are at? Or
this is kind of a step outside of my comfort zone.
Okay.
I typically do like ticks and tick-borne diseases,
Okay.
or diseases that are transmitted by insects or ticks, things like that. That does put me in the space of diseases that humans and animals get. And so I am very interested in diseases that affect both our pet species and humans. Kind of the buzzword right now is One Health, where you're checking out things that can affect everyone.
Right.
So I definitely have an interest in kind of that broad thing, but most of my previous research was on, ticks and fleas, kind of that ectoparasite thing. And so this is a step, to a different parasite for me. And that's why I was like, well, I'm going into uncharted territory. I need help. And I had Dr. Miller join the lab so that she could be the expert on the parasite, because I'm definitely out of my comfort zone.
So the coyotes, not all of them, but on occasion we'll get coyotes that have they're just generically called lice or whatever that they get, and they're usually got a more distinct smell to them, and Usually the fur is not so hot, and normally for those that happen to actually skin that animal, the skin actually is different.
Hmm.
Can you guys address what that actually is, and or just tell us what you know about that?
Yeah, so coyotes get a wide variety of ectoparasites, and we'll kind of move in order of things. One of the big ones they get is a mange,
Right.
where it is it's called sarcoptic mange, or some people call it red mange, and they think that that's what the description of like the chupacabra was, just like these really mangy looking coyotes. Uh, that's actually, it transiently can go from coyotes to humans. They don't do a great job of like setting up in the human skin, but again, another great reason to kind of safe handling of carcasses.
Right.
The the fur coat changes are usually due to the skin lesions. Um, they become so itchy that they'll break open wounds in their skin, kind of get a seepage of that kind of serum things, and it also changes the growth of the bacteria in in that area. So you may have overgrowth of bacteria that are not supposed to be there, or some yeasts, and so that smell likely is some kind of yeast overgrowth as it gets moist. Dermatitis is just like uh, inflammation in the skin, and so that distinct smell can be overgrowth of yeast or bacteria, and get kind of that kind of sticky, gross feel, and that's actually secondary to the mites that live in the skin.
Okay.
That's disgusting.
That is disgusting.
Yeah, I see Justin over here is just scratching. He's getting the itchies, you know. Yep, it definitely happens. Um, sometimes
I,
even
go ahead.
I sometimes give myself the creepy crawlies too.
I know when coyotes come in the door, I used to be a fur buyer years ago, and I quit in 1991. But when we do taxidermy and coyotes come in, people want them tanned or whatever. So I mean, it's pretty much habit now. If they come in the door, we've got gloves on. It's like they're just rarely you just say, well, that is just a beautiful coyote and it doesn't have any smell. I mean, they all smell. I mean, they're all just kind of nasty, you know. Raccoons are pretty much the same way. So, you know, there's probably issues with muskrats, but in beavers, but they always seem like they're always cleaner. And I know there's issues with them too, but
one of the interesting things you mentioned beavers, that we sometimes get reports from hunters or trappers, is they actually have a beneficial insect that lives in their fur layer, and that's the only place that you find them. They don't live outside. They're just called beaver beetles, and they live in the fur coat, and they're just kind of in there eating the dead skin and things like that, because it's a whole ecosystem underneath that fur layer.
right.
So sometimes we'll have trappers say, "Oh my god, I trapped this beaver, and then like all these things came out. You know, am I going to be infested or whatever?" And it's a weird little ecosystem that the beaver has built in its own fur, and the beavers are probably a beneficial thing to them and just living in the fur. So kind of another cool, you know, ectoparasite. It's not really a parasite, an insect of our trapped animals.
Right. I mean, I think generally trappers just call them generically, they just call them fleas, you know. So, but yeah, I mean, you'll just have a beaver and they'll just be popping off. You know, it's crazy. It's crazy. So,
yep.
Beaver Beetles.
Yeah.
We've always called them. It's amazing that they could, when they're submerged underwater, they create that little pocket of air underneath below the fur liner, I guess. And they can survive like that for who knows how long, I guess.
Yeah.
Wild.
It is.
But what would you say the scariest thing? I gotta know what's the scariest thing like an outdoorsman could catch from coyotes or coons or whatever it may be, fox. What's the one that concerns you that might be a little scary?
Dr. Miller, I'll let you go first.
Oh man.
Yeah, I want both. I want to know both. You might have different opinions.
Okay, so I mean it's my project, right? So Echinococcus is gonna be my number one answer.
Okay.
Just because you don't know when you get it, right? And I mean if I'm trapping and I know that there's something that I can catch in 10 to 15 years that can kill me, that puts it on one of the top five scare factors for me. Um, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Bayless Asker is also another one that scares me, but I'm not around enough coons to have that even be a factor for me. I think those are the only ones that I can think of. Because I mean, like ticks and fleas, like okay, I can get rid of those, right? Like if I get
Right.
something from them that's easily treatable, right? Diseases that aren't easily treatable and um uh identifiable, so they're not easy to number one diagnose and not easy to treat, would probably be Echinococcus and Bayless ascaris for me.
I'll add to that list a third one. So Chickenella is something that we see in hunters and trappers that are eating their game. So Chickenella is, we commonly think about it in pigs. So if anyone's grandma like would make their sausage patties into hockey pucks, just like burn them hard, uh, it's because that's one of the ways that the US eradicated at least the disease in humans, was telling people to cook their pork well done. And if you find people that never eat pork anything but well done, that was all because of Trichinella. And our confinement pork industry has really removed that as a major risk in our in our
Right.
commercial pork. But where we see outbreaks of Trichinella in the US is uh, people eating wild boar, and
Mhm.
and they just don't cook it all the way through. There's been I think a community that ate a black bear
Mhm.
maybe, and a couple other random uh, kind of bigger game species. And it can be in lots of warm-blooded mammals, because it basically just cycles. Like if a rat gets it in its muscles, and then a pig accidentally eats that rat, then the pig gets the muscle stages, and if we eat the pig, then we get the muscle stages. So it just kind of like moves from host to host, and it sets up in the muscles, and can cause a lot of damage. And so that's one that for hunters, when we're talking about eating game that is, our commercial food pipeline has lots of checks and balances for safety, and wild game, it doesn't, right?
Right.
They're out there eating random things and doing their own things. And so being conscientious, if you are eating your game, often cooking it a little bit more well done than what you might like your steak is completely rare. It may be safer for certain things, especially if you're having some kind of wild pork, or eating carnivore, really, because uh, they're eating other things as well. So Trichinella is a kind of a big one, and again, historically been associated with commercial pork, but we've kind of gotten on top of that.
It's in pork, like in the kind of this, they've had this kind of cottage industry of free range hogs. In some of the more heirloom breeds, clearly those would be just taking it back 30 years ago. That pork's going to need to be cooked, fully cooked, versus the ones that are raised in confinement, buildings.
Yeah,
So
and,
kind of
and
like free range chickens, but it's
uh-huh.
hogs.
I'll see some disconnects because the food industry has shifted. The the confinement pork industry has made it safer to eat, and so then some of those fancy chefs are like, oh, you know what? Let's try eating medium pork. It's nice. It's more tender, and
Right.
they've lost that kind of scare, and that may be okay in confinement. And but then it shifts over, like you said, and there's those backyard organic pasture raised, and they're back to the same exposure level, and again, safe to eat if you cook that pork thoroughly. So making sure that it comes to temperature for well done is appropriate for that specific, raised structure. system for how they raise their pork, because again, the wild boars are carrying that parasite around everywhere. It's in a variety of animals. So if you put your pigs out on pasture, they're likely going to be exposed in a way that could be in their meat. So like you said, that backyard operation, there's a growing industry. And again, really a push is just keep cooking that pork well done.
Right.
Well, you officially scared the hell out of me.
We're ruining everything for you.
I'm no
ruining
longer
your hobbies.
skinning
We're
anything
ruining
at
your
work.
meats. We're ruining everything.
I've been in an office
Yeah.
job. I'm done.
we're gonna fit Justin for a bubble so that he doesn't have to interact with the outside world anymore. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, you got any concluders, Charlie? I really appreciate you guys taking the time and filling us in on all this.
I mean, a lot of this tell me if I'm wrong, but we are talking in some cases worst case scenario. If everyone's common sense, washes their hands, hopefully wears gloves, and just this a lot of this has been around for a long time, and hopefully no one personally ends up with this issue. But on the other hand, thankfully, your university, you guys are heading up this study, obviously to have the information out there. So, that's kind of where I'm at. But
yeah, I think you're spot on. We're not trying to scare anyone but Justin. We're just trying to say, if we looked at the most at-risk populations, it would be people who handle these things. And so
Sure.
again, just being smart with those is a great start. And again, we're trying to find out more information so we could tell you how risky it is. Maybe at the end of the study, we say, all right, it's out there in coyotes, but it's still a low risk. Just kind of keep doing your thing. And we go about our, business. We just don't know right now. And that's kind of the empty spot that we're trying to feel, is get that information out.
Good deal.
Well, again, I'll make one last pitch to say, if you're a trapper and interested in partnering with us, check out our links, get in contact with us, just shoot us a quick email or a Facebook message. That way we can, get more information to you about how we might be able to best collect carcasses. The way we've been most successful is, getting in good contact with someone. There's lots of trappers that get lots of coyotes a year, and if we don't know about it, then we can't get to them. So
Right.
If you help us out by reaching out, we would love to get those carcasses from you.
We will certainly get this out on our end as we can. And we do have, for those of you that live very locally, we do have this little brochure, which I'm sure is available online. But for those of you that like a hard copy, we do have these brochures. So
yeah. And to add to what Brian was saying, when they collect the carcasses, to note the county that these coyotes are trapped and killed in, is really also going to be helpful to us as well, because it's great if we have the carcasses, but we'd also like to know what county they were trapped in. So that way, if we do have positives, we know where we can circle back to or identify hot spots within the states, to say, hey, South Indiana might not be an issue, but North Indiana, we've seen more positives here. So trappers in these counties or this location really need to be careful and that sort of thing. So location is another big thing for us.
We appreciate it. Oh, one last thing I will mention, you'd mentioned coyotes in warm weather, not that you don't want ones that are starting to degrade. Sometimes those just float away.
Yep. They just magically disappear into the night. I definitely know that as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian, Kamilyah, and
thanks so much for having us on. We really appreciate it.
We sure appreciate you guys, what you're doing.
Have a good day.
Yeah,
Have a good one.
you.